Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. I invite everybody to rise and join Council in singing a version of O Canada. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. We have regrets this evening from Councillor Lischina, and I now call for declarations of pecuniary interest. And Madam Clerk, I don't see any. We need a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the previous council meetings as listed in the agenda. And Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Giddings, thank you for that. All in favor? And the minutes are confirmed. We have no public presentations, but we do have a number of delegations on an item that isn't going to be voted on until January 14th. And under our rules, you don't get to come twice and say the same thing. So we're happy to hear you if you want to delegate on January 14th's vote on December 17th, but please bear in mind our rules about repetition. Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
The first delegation is Scott Z. From the Chinese-Canadian Association for Civic Engagement regarding the recreational cannabis legislation update.
Welcome, Mr. Shi. Council looks forward to your information.
Honorable Mayor Borden, Honorable Town and Regional Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm Scott Shi. It's my honor to be a delegate this meeting on behalf of Chinese-Canadian Association for Civic Engagement. I'm also a resident from Ward 5. About 200 years ago, the widespread addiction of using opium in China caused serious social and economic disruptions. In June 1839, the Chinese government confiscated and burned more than 20,000 chests of opium, some of 1,400 tons of drugs in Guangzhou. This is all foreign traders. Primary British has been illegal export opium from India to China since 18th century. No one knew at that time this indecence would lead a series of political, military events, and China's ban of opium has deeply shaped the Chinese history and curved people's mentality in many ways. It may help to explain why Chinese around the world are more vigilant to the use drug in any forms. Today, now, we are here to discuss the cannabis legislation, making an important decision for the residents and their children, which I believe there may an impact on Canada as well. the retail store provides a much easier access to marijuana, and it's commonly believed that consumption will go up, which may bring a series of problems such as location control, community safety, family and children safe, and health. It may threaten the physical, mental health of our people, and eventually it may hurt the economics. Do we have all the policy and the measure in place to protect our community? I will share a story with you. So a mom from my daughter's school wrote an email to me recently. I was shocked because her family was suffering from cannabis smoke since this summer, because there is a 24-hour convenience store just across the street from her backyard. She can smell from her children's bedroom for that smoke. She is very worried about the cannabis store opening in Oakville, which could make the situation even worse. There are so many unanswered questions and unaddressed issues related to cannabis retail store. The most worrisome is that we don't know what we don't know. Everyone knows there's danger and health risk for secondhand tobacco smoke. However, do we know enough about the secondhand marijuana smoke to find out the health effect of secondhand cannabis smoke? Several researchers at the University of Calgary reviewed thousands of research articles on long and short-term health effect of exposure to secondhand marijuana smoke. But they have yet to find enough data and evidence of these possible risks. Given the current state of the knowledge, to minimize the risk of the smoke, the best approach for policymakers is to stay cautious and adopt harm reduction policy. Two researchers at the Canadian Pediatric Society, Dr. Grant and Dr. Blujay, also wrote an article about cannabis and Canada's children and youth. They point out that cannabis legislation will have a significant impact on the lives and the health of the children and the youth, and the safeguards are necessary based on the physical and the mental health risks with many legal, financial, and the public safety issues at stake. Policymakers, with support from physicians and the public at large, must continue to limit access to cannabis. Kids' health and safety are most priority for all of us. The cannabis store can also impact on our home. We are so proud of Oakville as the best place to live in Canada. Beautiful environment, good school, and a friendly neighborhood attract people moving anywhere to Oakville. I urge our council to make a responsible decision and to focus on the long-term sustainable development of Oakville's economy, improve the community and the environment, attract more people, talent, more business, and create more jobs for a better future of Oakville. Open cannabis store may push people away to those opt-out cities like Markham and Richmond Hill, which may eventually hurt Oakville's economy as well. Please don't make this happen in our town. Keep Oakville is the best place to live. Can you imagine this will be the best place to live? I would like to quote Dr. Claire McKenzie, assistant professor from Harvard Medical School, to conclude my presentation today. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's safe. And when we make choices that have risk, it's not fair to impose those risks to other people, especially children, especially when they could literally be harmed for the rest of their lives. At last, I would like to ask each of you, my dear mayor and councilors, think carefully and make the right decision for an event for ever better Oakville. please vote out cannabis store in Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you for your information, sir. Are there questions for the delegation? Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Sin Young Chu, also here to speak to item 3 on tonight's agenda.
Welcome, Ms. Xu. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a presentation.
Not a problem. I can pull it up for you. And which one is it?
The petition one. Sorry. Yes, that's me.
Perfect. Here you go.
All right. Good evening, Good evening, Mayor and the councilors. Thanks for the opportunity for me here tonight. My name is Xin Yung Chu, and I have been a resident in Oakville for 6 years. I'm here tonight to present a petition signed by 2,268 residents back in March regards to people who do not want to have a cannabis store in Oakville. I have already passed a copy of the petition, which is in a paper format, to the town clerk department for you to take a look. Oh, I can do that myself. Sorry.
For the next slide,
I just do this?
yeah, you can just hit next.
Okay. So first, a little bit of background about this petition. This petition was initiated back in March when the Liberal provincial government kicked off the implementation of the legalization. Due to the lack of information and lack of transparency, there's no enough information being provided neither to the municipal government nor to the public regards to the regulation for road safety and use protection and regulation. So as a result of that, a lot of our residents are extremely concerned. A small group of us started this petition, and so enough, we get a very strong support across literally all wards in Oakville. So here's a quick chart to show you that the number of residents who signed this petition in your ward total up to 2,268 residents. So back in the spring, we understand the decision was not with the town, but with the province. So we're unable to present to the town. So a copy of this petition was presented to MPP Kevin Flynn, who read it in the legislative Assembly of Ontario, and then he also passed it to the Attorney General of Ontario of this petition back in May. So as you know, things have changed. So the new provincial government now want to privatize the cannabis store in Oakville, which will make the resident even more concerned because that means the store could be open or located literally anywhere in our neighborhood. So I just laid out a couple of the key concerns from the resident who signed this. Number one is the negative impact for Oakville. As you know, Oakville is known as a small town sense of a community, like Mayor Burton used to say. Oakville is a city, we call ourselves a town, but we act as a village. That's part of the reason why we are named the best place to live in Canada. So both the council and the mayor and the residents stood up fight for keeping Glen Eden. So we have been created and protected a character of residential neighborhood for Oakville, which for us as a resident, we don't see how the cannabis retail store will fit in our mission to be the most livable town in Canada. Opening a retail cannabis store would change people's perception for Oakville, which would influence people's decision to either move to or remain in Oakville. That would have direct impact to the housing price of our town as well. And the impact of the use. The negative impact of marijuana for the youth, everybody knows that. I don't think it's necessary to readdress them here. I just want to share some of the investigation reported from Colorado, who legalized marijuana for 5 years. 5 years of commercialized pod, having 5 years of more marijuana in school than ever a teacher and an administrator ever feared. So in the last 5 years, they reported the drug violation for their school increased from kindergarten to grade 12 by 45%. And that number for high school is actually increased by 71%. So the school suspension for drug violation is actually increased also 45%. Does Colorado not have regulation to restrict access for use for marijuana? They must do. However, this is what happened, what they have experienced in the last 5 years. I think for any parents who have a teenager child, like myself, looking at those statistics will be extremely concerned. So law enforcement, that's one of the areas remain have a lot of unanswered questions. So how the police will identify if the driver is high, how reliable their testing device it is, or like how the legalization of marijuana will affect drivers. Again, I also take a quick look of some statistic from the US. So 5 years of commercialized marijuana is doubling the number of fatal crash for driver who's involved and who being tested to be positive for marijuana usage. So things the new provincial government want change the rules now. Want to privatize the cannabis retail. So we also have additional questions, which we are also very concerned. So first question is, will the town of Oakville has control over? Will the town have control over of where the store goes or how many store goes to in one particular area? Is there number of a license on limitation to be offered? And also, if the restriction, say, for example, is 150 meters away from a school, will a store that 170 meters away from a school will be approved to sell cannabis, even though it's a property line to property line? So we don't, as of now, we don't know if the town will have any control over of the actual location selection. Next is, Ontario actually allow purchasing the cannabis through online, which is a channel for people who want to have access to it. So then the question is, why do we have to have a retail store? Why can we opt out retail store, but keep the mail delivery for people who want to have access, and then also respect people who don't want to have it in our neighborhood? So the last point I want to make here is, as we all know, Mississauga has just decided to say no to cannabis store in their city. So what does this mean for Oakville? What is the impact for us? Is that going to lead more pressure for Oakville to have additional store, which is going to result in a higher concentration of number of stores, or more cannabis buyer going to coming from other municipality into our neighborhood to buy marijuana? So those are all the key concerns we have. Again, back to the screen, the decision was not with the town, but things has changed. Now the provincial government has given an opportunity to the municipal government to decide whether we want to opt in or opt out, allowing cannabis store in our boundaries. So back to the August in the summer, Mayor Burton and the 7 other councilors, which most of them are re-elected here, belated congratulations, has noted that they will opt out for cannabis store due to the safety concern and lack of information. So we appreciated your stand on this issue, and we are counting on your promises. So on behalf of the 2268 residents who signed this petition and do not want a retail cannabis store in Canada, I would like to ask you to act on our concern and vote to opt out cannabis store for Oakville and keep Oakville to be the most livable town in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Other questions? Thank you, ma'am. Oh, Councillor Elger?
It's not a question of the delegation. It's a question of staff, just on one issue. And related.
Can I?
It's a great system. Yep. Sure. Absolutely. Yep. Sorry.
So, Madam Clerk, thank you, ma'am. Would you call?
Thank you.
For the delegation, thank you.
Ms. Chu, could we call you back, please?
Yes.
Thank you for your delegation, and through you, Your Worship. I want to know how you feel about the argument that has been posed in some jurisdictions that refusing to opt in would simply increase black market activity. Now, you seem to have done a lot of research. I have spoken to you directly, as well as I've heard your delegation today. So I'm curious what your view is on that argument that the lack of a legal retail outlet equals more black market activity. Do you have some comment on that?
My view on that, legalized marijuana, when they sell it through the government, there's a tax portion attached to it. So, which is the difference between the legalized marijuana recreational versus the black market, which they do not have the tax portion for it. So I believe for the people who currently purchase through the black market, highly likely would not want to pay a higher price, including the tax portion, to go through the proper channel of the regulated, controlled recreational marijuana. So those people might still go through their existing channel of the black market. So that's why I understand part of the argument is by legalized marijuana that it will be eliminated or at least reduce, minimize the black market. But reality, I doubted that. I would like to see more data in regards to that because especially, I remember one of the gentlemen being delegated in the previous meeting for this topic also mentioned he himself was a marijuana user himself. He actually complained and addressed that, saying the government priced the marijuana too high, that he cannot afford it. He probably still going to go through his existing channel of the black market.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you, Ms. Chu.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation, please?
The next delegation is May C., here also speaking to item 3 on tonight's agenda.
Welcome, Ms. Shi. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, dear Mayor Burton and councilors. It's my honor today to speak on this topic on behalf of Oakville Chinese Resident Association. One of the missions of our association is to encourage members to engage in Oakville local community issues and work together with other communities to make Oakville a better place for everyone. We serve communities around all 7 wards of Oakville. Many of our members have expressed deep concerns over the impact of legalizing recreational cannabis on our neighborhoods, especially on young adults. I live in Ward 5, and I have 2 boys, 13 and 9 years old. Just like any other mom, I feel increasingly challenging to explain to my teenager son that recreational marijuana is not safe, while the government has legalized it. Having physical retail cannabis stores in our neighborhoods, only 150 meters from schools, and allowing public smoking pots near school properties, only 20 meters from school property, will make this worse. According to Horton Health Department, cannabis can be harmful to brain development, and the brain does not stop developing until around age 25. Cannabis has become much more potent in recent years, which could increase health risks, including psychotic symptoms, difficulty with thinking and problem solving, disrupted learning and memory. A study showed that 1 in 6 people who use marijuana during adolescence will develop an addiction. An additional danger associated with marijuana use observed in adolescents is it's a gateway drug to other illegal drugs like cocaine and heroin. So also, adolescents' exposure to marijuana causes long-term mental health problems. Our schools and communities are already dealing with mental health crisis and need increased funding. Our health care system is under pressure. Why we're adding more stress to this? Let's look at some evidences from some states of US which legalized marijuana. Recent results from an Oregon Research Institute study pointed out that youth surveyed prior to legalization from communities that later prohibited sales were less likely to increase willingness and intent to try marijuana compared to those from communities that later allowed sales. This is a very strong evidence why we should not allow cannabis retail stores here in Oakville. There are other safety concerns, such as increased crime rate and break-ins around the surrounding areas, especially when neighboring Mississauga has opted out, and online sales option is available to adults. On August 16th, Mayor Burton, along with 7 councilors from previous council, announced their positions on opting out cannabis stores in Oakville if re-elected. Now the majority of the council are re-elected, and most newly elected councilors also expressed their opting out stance during election campaigns. We applaud your willingness to listen to ordinary residents rather than lobbyists from cannabis companies, and request you keep your campaign promises for the good of our community, for the future of our children and grandchildren. I believe after many years, when we look back, people will say, it's this council, mayor and councilors who made the right decision to keep Oakville safe, the most livable place in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. I want to ask, Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The next delegation is Ken Butterworth, also speaking to item 3.
Mr. Butterworth, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Mayor, town councilors, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you here today. I'm probably the only one here that's for the stores. Sorry, I've got a really bad back problem right now. It's aching. A couple of months ago, there was an article in the Beaver with the mayor, the elected incumbents, and anybody that was running, that they were all for the opting out. And the Beaver made it look or sound, the way I read it, as you're all kind of suffering from 50s reefer madness, paranoia. Like you've all got your opinions and stuff like that, and I respect those. As if the town would take the time to think about this and allow the recreational store of marijuana to be sold, I believe the town has the right to regulate where the business license will be operated from, and if the town could also look into more exact requirements that are needed, because this is something new. With bylaws, maybe there could be more stringent bylaws put in place. I do have a somewhat of a business plan I will bring back for the more detail. It will be a safe, it won't be a pot shop selling marijuana over the counter. It will be tightly regulated, very secure operation. Very secure. Panic buttons, panic room if there's any problem. I'm not sure if armed security is allowed, but if it is, it will be available. I've been to, I don't know if any of you have gone into a dispensary just to check them out to see what they are like. I have, and I ask questions, and basically they're just drug dealers selling pot over the counter now. I asked if they have these, there's gizmos out there that can tell you how much THC is in your in the pot. And they didn't have a clue what I was talking about. And they thought that would be a good idea, but they won't buy them because they're thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for these apparatus, and they don't want to spend that kind of money. To make it safe, if I am allowed, I would have those detectors as well for mold, to make it absolutely safe medical marijuana for recreational use. If I'm allowed, after renovations, remodeling are paid for a place that I have scouted that is over a mile away from any school or park. I'm not looking to be rich. People are labeling this the new green gold. I'm not looking to have a six-figure bank account. I don't see the purpose of having one. All I want is a piece of property up north to go camping on and a vehicle to get me there. After everything's paid for, I will actually have my profits turned over or given away to all local charities. First, children and women's shelters will not be asking the government or the town for another penny. There's a song by Steve Miller called Fly Like an Eagle. And I'd like to recite a verse from that. It says, feed the babies, don't have enough to eat. Shoe the children with no shoes on their feet. House the people living in the streets. Yes, there is a solution. And I would like to do that. My family tells me I have a big heart, and that's all I want to do is give. My employees would have a middle class earning wage, and charities will be taken care of. That's all I want to do is take care of charities. And they're always screaming they don't have money. I don't need money. I don't want money. I just want a little piece of this, a little of that, and give my money away. I have spoken with other dispensaries, and there is one that does give away. I think the person who runs the dispensary's mother works for a women's shelter, and he gives away thousands of dollars to women's shelters to take care of them and to food banks. And that's what I look forward to doing if I am allowed to do this. If you will vote yes, I know it's a hard upclimb battle for me or anybody that wants to do this. I know you almost have your mind set out, and I'm hoping you will reconsider and think of charities, because that's, if you can regulate who has the business and where the business goes, you can say, no, you're not putting one there, and we don't want you to have one there, and your business plan isn't safe for our community. I will have doors, barriers. You will not be allowed in unless you are buzzed in. All glass will be bulletproof. I will hopefully be able to work with police if it is allowed to have fake ID detectors. I don't know if they're available, but I don't want somebody 17 coming and saying they're 21 and buying something that they're not allowed to have. I want to thank you for my time. I'll be allowed to speak here, and you'll have a good night.
Thank you very much for your information, sir. And I thank everybody who's sending in their thoughts and their advice on the subject. And Council will consider everything on January 14th at its meeting then. Council, I now need to call your attention to the Standing Committee of the Whole reports as listed in your agenda. The 2019 Budget Committee, the Community Services Committee, the Administrative Services Committee, and the confidential report of the closed session of the Administrative Services Committee. And I'd like a mover and seconder for those reports. Councillor Adams and Councillor O'Meara, all those in favor? Any opposed? The reports are adopted. Council, we have a consent item. This is an amendment to the first robotics license agreement, and it's a report from the Economic Development Department. And the motion is that the town solicitor be authorized to negotiate an amendment to the license agreement between the town and the First Robotics team attached as Appendix A to this report, enabling the group to use additional space in the building as set out in the report, and that the amending agreement be executed in accordance with Bylaw 2013-57. Councillor Adams moves approval. Councillor Grant seconds. Any discussion? All in favor? And that really was a consent item. It's carried. The next item before us is the pleasant opportunity to hear of the progress of Oakville Enterprises Corporation. And we'll look to Rob Lister, the President and CEO of Oakville Enterprises Corporation, who is doubtless too modest to tell you, but I'm not. He's recently
We're going to tell you.
Oh, you're going to?
Yeah.
Oh, well, then
Not me.
He's just been chosen Leader of the Year in the energy industry, and I think we can all be proud of him, and you can feel like...
Thank you.
You can feel like we helped raise him up.
Yeah.
Mr. Lister, we look forward to your report.
Thank you. Where am I looking here?
Trying to full screen it.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Good evening, Mayor Burton, councillors. Thank you for having us here this evening. Tonight with me, I have the chair of our board, Marie Oswald. Raise your hand, Marie. And board of director member, Sarah Lance. Thank you. And also I have a number of my staff with me this evening. We have Pat Spruan, our corporate secretary, Jody Charto, our manager of communications and marketing, Mary Caputi, senior vice president of enterprise innovation, Doug Walton, vice president of business development, Scott Moody, chief operating officer of Oakville Hydro, Sean McCoggan, chief operating officer of energy and infrastructure services, and Karen Monner, our chief financial officer. Now this evening, I am going to ask Karen to come up and for her first opportunity to present to council. And with that, here's Karen. And myself and staff will be available for questions after Karen's finished.
Thank you very much, Rob. And thank you, Mayor Burton and Council, for the opportunity to present to you this evening. Today, I'm going to review 4 topic areas with you: the Oakville Enterprises line of business structure, an outage update, a safety update, and our ongoing commitment to community involvement. People are at the center of our brand. Every day, we strive to deliver on our brand promise, cherish customers, deliver flawlessly, and stay a step ahead. Our people endeavor to lead, innovate, and commit to excellence. This is a chart for a quick refresh for Council on our corporate structure. The OEC family of companies can be broken into 4 groups or lines of business. They include distribution, infrastructure, energy services, and generation. And I am very pleased to announce and to share again that on December 13th, it was the Electricity Human Resource Canada Association that announced that Rob Lister, Oakville Enterprises CEO and President, was selected as Leader of the Year. The Leader of the Year award was established to recognize and celebrate an individual who has made an outstanding contribution to their organization within the Canadian electricity industry through visionary people management strategies and leadership. The criteria for the award is an individual who has effected positive change and is dedicated to ensuring that their workforce has the opportunity and skills to contribute to the business's overall strategy and success. We are also very proud of the accomplishments and awards of Oakville Hydro. To recap the year, in 2018, we received the Ontario Energy Association Customer Service Award, the Canadian Electricity Association Centre of Excellence Award, and the Electrical Distributors Association Performance Excellence Award. Now on to electricity consumption. In 2018, Oakville's electricity consumptions were up slightly compared to 2017, owing to a very warm summer. Our average interruption duration remains at approximately 30 minutes, while the provincial average exceeds 100 minutes. This is a testament to our resilient system and responsive crews. I'd like to talk now about the outage that occurred on December 2nd. On Sunday, December 2nd, several lightning strikes occurred in Oakville. At 8:08 p.m., damage occurred to an insulator at Hydro One's Palermo transfer station. The resulting power outage impacted 9,608 customers in Oakville's wards 2, 4, and 5. Burlington and Milton customers were also affected by the transformer's damage. Next, within Oakville Hydro, immediately after the strike, 5 switchgears sensed the voltage loss and automatically operated. 1,085 customers were restored within 16 seconds. After this, Oakville Hydro remotely operated a switch from the control room. The power to the remaining 8,438 customers was restored by 8:14 p.m. This is a good example of the effectiveness of our automatic grid system. Oakville Hydro is quite proud of earning the IHSA President's Award for 1.25 million hours worked with no lost time incidents. In our sustainability program, we have diverted 3,000 kilograms per year of paper waste through e-billing and 329 kilograms of electronic waste through recycling in 2018. To drill into our e-billing campaign a little bit, Oakville Hydro in 2018 supported 3 separate e-billing campaigns. In Q1, we had a Give Back campaign that provided donations to the Oakville Hospital Foundation. In Q2, we had a tree planting campaign that offered to plant a tree in the Oakville community. And in Q3 and Q4, we offered free pizza lunch sponsored by Boston Pizza. After the 3 campaigns, 25% of the Oakville Hydro customers have been converted to e-billing. Every year, we reach out to high schools and offer to host students who don't have other options locally for Take Your Kids to Work Day. This year, students attended our programs from schools in Oakville, Milton, and Hamilton. Oakville Hydro provided a full-day program where students were informed about a variety of topics, including innovation, technology, marketing, health and safety, and human resources. And finally, Oakville Hydro participated in the annual Santa Claus Parade. Our staff and families enjoyed being part of the day. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Councillor Adams may have a question for one of you here.
Would you be so kind as to go back to your e-billing slide? Can you tell us which of your programs worked the best?
The free pizza lunch has been the most successful.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Karen. I just, where you mentioned where we were on the provincial average in terms of lost hours, where are we on the provincial average in terms of consumption?
I'm not sure about that.
To you, Mr. Mayor. If my memory serves me, I think we represent actually about 2% of the province's consumption and peak, like in that range.
I was just trying to see, it looks like we've been kind of relatively stagnant over the past 4 years. So where does that align with what's happening elsewhere in the province though, or where are the lines trending?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, very much so. In fact, what you'll see, it is flat, and a big part of that is due to conservation, because we have had reasonable growth in the town of Oakville due to the new subdivisions going north of Dundas. So without conservation, the load would have been increasing, and that's been experienced in Toronto, for example, where even with all the condominium growth in Toronto, their actual consumption is dropping over time. So it is consistent, yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you very much to Oakville Enterprises for a good report. And Councillor Knoll?
I'm going to give you a motion to receive the report.
Yes, thank you. Would one of you, Councillor Chisholm seconds. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that report is received. Now, Council, you've had your delegations and you've had the benefit of the update from staff, and there's, I'm sure, going to be more as the province continues to figure out what it's doing on this front. And unless you have questions for staff on the material they've provided, I'm looking for receipt of the material. Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, I just had one question to staff, and it related to can a municipality be more restrictive than the 150 meters? And with what I read, if we opt in, we cannot be more restrictive. So if it's 151 meters, it'll be allowed. I just wonder, can staff confirm whether that in fact is the case?
Hello, staff. Can we change the 150 meters?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, you cannot.
Thank you. Councillor O'Meara, are you next?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple questions. I read recently that a 78,000 square foot cannabis warehouse had opened up in Oakville, and I'm wondering if town staff knew anything about that.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I will refer the question to the Commissioner.
We are notified of whenever there is a cannabis opening up. We are notified either through, and it mostly comes through the building department. I think we've had one notification of a prospective purchase of a property. We're not aware of whether or not they've purchased that property. And this is a person who was warehousing the product and then going to be selling it. And so they haven't come in with building permits since that point in time. So we're not aware of one who is warehousing it to distribute.
And would there be any, so is it mandated that we would be notified about this?
Nadia could clarify me, but I understand it is a federal requirements that they notify representative at the municipality, and we've indicated to them that that notice should definitely be going to the building department as well as to the clerks as well.
Thank you. I had another question with regards to land use in terms of where private businesses could open up. Do we have any say? Sorry, I wouldn't say. Do we have any authority in terms of where we would be able to have private retail businesses operate?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the municipalities do not have the authority for siting locations. There is a prohibition on municipalities from zoning cannabis retail stores. You cannot zone for that land use.
But it couldn't go in a residential neighborhood, or again, we would have no concern. Does it need to be in a commercial retail area, or is that out of the gamut as well?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there is nothing in the cannabis legislation that sets that out, but the AGCO, the regulator for cannabis retail stores, has indicated that it is considered a retail land use.
Okay. Thanks. And I have a couple questions just with regards to costing on this. Have we, do we know what Oakville's share of the $40 million would be if we were to opt in? I know there was per household and some in January and some after, but I'm wondering what exactly it is that we're looking at.
Through you, Mayor Burton, the first payment from the province in January will be approximately $90,000 for Oakville.
And then after that?
The second payment depends on whether municipalities opt in or out. Municipalities that opt out will receive a second payment of $5,000. If you opt in, then there would be a second payment on a per household basis.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
I just have a question that goes back to the first one. You're on page 44 when it said that there has to be a notice of application for a retail store authorization, that municipalities and their residents have an ability to make written submissions. I assume that's to the province, so that if there's a huge problem with where they've proposed, the province can go back and look at it again?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the AGCO has a 15-day period for comments. The notice is provided on the AGCO website as well as on the proposed location. There is no direct notice to the municipality. The comments have to be related to public health and safety, protecting youth and restricting their access to cannabis, and preventing illegal activities in relation to cannabis.
Councillor Chisholm?
Just a quick question. In the report itself, it doesn't really break down with respect to what's going to cost the municipality for enforcement and administrative costs. Would there be consideration in the report? I would assume in January 14th, we would have a better understanding of what the financial implications would be for opting in or opting out.
I'm going to call on the Director of Municipal Enforcement to answer your question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what we would say at this time, based on the current structure of legislation, enforcement is either at the regional health level or the police level. Municipal enforcement, based on the current structure, isn't impacted.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hazatil.
The document doesn't share anything about what the pre-qualification of a potential operator would be. So do you have any information you could share with us tonight about that?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there's details in the regulation about certain restrictions that you cannot have a criminal record. They cannot be indebted to the province or the federal government for taxes. Other than those things, I haven't looked in detail at the regulations on the applicants, but we could certainly report back on that.
Okay. I have a second question. In terms of, I'll call it oversight, so based on what the director just said, if it was approved and they were operating, what mechanism is in place in terms of assurance around age requirement, safety, security on the premises? Could somebody talk to that or share perspective on how that could possibly either fall within the town's obligations, or what the region or the province would be doing?
Through you, Mayor Burton, my understanding of the cannabis legislation is that the AGCO is the regulator, so they would be responsible for enforcing all of the requirements.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to start over here and come across. Councillor Sandu.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Two questions, really. Last week we chatted a little bit about municipal accommodation tax that we were adding to Airbnb type locations as well as hotels. Are we able to add an additional tax to cannabis retailers as well?
Through you, Mayor Burton, not to my knowledge. I think the tax is set out through the federal legislation.
Fair. And I think the other question I have is for Mr. Barry, specifically around enforcement. I know that we say that private smoking or smoking generally and interfering with the lawful enjoyment of neighboring residences is typically a civil issue. How do we manage that with other types of, I guess, smoke nuisances?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I only heard part of that. I'm just to clarify, it's the smoke from cannabis between residences, or yes?
Between residences, and I guess the second layer of that would be in public places as well.
In public places. Again, it would be purely between residences. It becomes a civil issue that we would essentially recommend mediation.
So we don't currently interfere with anything currently as well, with any other type of smoke or things like that? Okay.
Thank you. And from a public perspective, the legislation permits the public use of cannabis, so again, it wouldn't be an enforcement action.
Sorry, one last question. If we're talking about public use, what are some of the other public smoking requirements that we would have? It would be the same as any other type of smoking that we would have currently, correct? Like X amount of feet from a building?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the legislation specifically dovetails the cannabis legislation with the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So all of the applicable regulations apply to both. And enforcement is done through the region, through the health department.
Councillor Farmer.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My questions actually are also around the report speaks to public consumption bylaws that the City of Markham and the Town of Richmond Hill have adopted, and that if we were to consider these bylaws, that we would not be able to enforce the regulations. So I have two questions. Do we have any information on how and what the City of Markham and Town of Richmond Hill are doing to enforce? And the second part of that is, I know that the police have said they will not take on any additional enforcement until a social adjustment period has passed of 12 months. Is that 12 months from the October legislation date, or is that 12 months from the opt-in versus opt-out date? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the first question with respect to what Markham and Richmond Hill have done, they've essentially coordinated their efforts with the regional police in their area. So the bylaw enforcement units won't be enforcing the legislation, which is why we've contacted Halton Regional Police to see where we would stand in a similar situation. And they've provided feedback, again, that they wouldn't be able to take that on, at least for 12 months. Again, the 12-month is a number they've given. We haven't determined an exact date when that might be up for review. If that were something that were considered, we would go back and speak to them about that. But I do think part of the other comment that they've made is that any bylaw would have to be region-wide before they would become involved, which is probably the larger issue that we'd have to deal with.
Great. Thank you so much.
Councillor Adams, are you next?
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of questions. First, can you tell me what the funding is for the Region of Halton? Do they get a second check of $90,000 in January, or do they get half of our $90,000? How does that work?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the first payment for Halton Region is approximately $257,000.
So that's separate and distinct from the $90,000 that we receive, and Burlington, I understand, receives a similar amount.
That's correct.
Okay. And then can you tell me, is it correct that municipalities who opt out will not be eligible to receive future funding even if they later opt in?
Through you, Mayor Burton, it's not clear from the information that we've received. The only information that we have is that municipalities that opt out will receive a second payment of $5,000, and my understanding is that there are only 2 payments.
So there's not been consideration for what happens at some later date, or maybe?
Through you, Mayor Burton, there could be. I don't know at this time.
So still fluid, I'll say. How about that? I understood that the number of licenses that are going to be provided has been pushed down to 25. And I also understand that today might have been the first day that they were going to start receiving or accepting applications for licenses. Do we have any information as to if anybody has expressed interest in trying to have a license in Oakville?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the lottery system will be implemented by the AGCO to determine who will receive one of the 25 stores. Expressions of interest will be submitted to the AGCO beginning on January 7th to January 9th. So they will not be accepting applications in December as previously announced.
Okay, even more new information. Did they give any indication as to whether those 25 are going to be geographically dispersed, or is it going to truly be a lottery?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I don't have any information on the geographic distribution at this time.
Thank you so much.
Councillor, I read today in the press that 6 licenses have been allocated for a lottery among Durham, York, Peel, and Halton. And I also read in a provincial release that of the $40 million over 2 years that they're allocating to municipalities, they're holding back $15 million for contingency. So there's a temporary shortage that I imagine will be corrected. Most markets in the circumstances bounce back very substantially. And, but there's only 6 supposedly allocated to the outer ring.
Thank you for that information, and it shows the fluidity with which the matter is happening.
We are truly in a state of flux. Councillor Grant?
Which kind of dovetails at all my other questions have been asked, but with this fluidity, do we have any indication from the province, any deadline for the announcements? It seems that there's something new from them every other week, and we are truly living in a time where we're trying to make a decision without any real information or trying to hold sand in our palm. Is there any point where we're going to know exactly what the province is planning?
Well, perhaps you could remind everyone of the date by which we have to communicate opting out or we're opted in. What's that date?
Through you, Mayor Burton, January 22nd is established through regulation. That is the date by which municipalities have to opt out.
So that's the one certainty point. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you, Worship. A couple questions. First of all, we've heard already tonight through confirmation by questions from my colleagues about ability to be able to participate in the zoning or the location of stores, and we also heard a few moments ago that we have no right to tax the stores. Do we have any rights at all as it pertains to, for example, business licensing? I know as a part of the Municipal Act, we have the right to license businesses in our community. Do we have that right?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, municipalities are prohibited from business licensing for cannabis retail stores.
Okay. Right now, if somebody has a medical license to acquire cannabis for medicinal purposes, are they able to acquire it in Oakville today?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the Federal Cannabis Act maintains a separate regime for medical marijuana and access to it.
And there is access in Oakville today, correct?
Through you, Mayor Burton, again, the medical regime is completely separate, so you can get a prescription from your doctor and you can order from a licensed producer.
Great. So my next question relates to the issue of opting in or opting out. If we were to choose to opt out, that would in no way impact the access to medical grade medicinal cannabis and cannabis products to patients that are prescribed them and require them for their treatment?
Through you, Mayor Burton, that is correct.
Okay. I have a question with respect to bylaw enforcement. I'm not sure if who wants to take that, but
well,
I'll start.
You could always start with Nadia. She's very resourceful.
Right now, we, and when I say we, I'm talking the big we as in the region and the town, enforce the sale of tobacco to minors. I know that Mr. Barry's, I'm not sure if your office is directly involved. I think it's the Department, the Medical Officer of Health that manages that. But you have intimate information on this. I know that you and I have communicated on it several times. So at this point in time, we are monitoring the sale of tobacco products to minors as well as this new craze of vape products to minors.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
And how effective has that been to date?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure I could quantify that. I can say that we still receive complaints about it. So as with any kind of a business like this, where there's a will, there's a way, and there will be concerns through any type of store.
So the legislation specifically forbids retailers from selling tobacco and vape products to minors?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And the region, my understanding is the region conducts test shopping when there's concerns to see if they'll sell. And as we have heard in some cases that parents have advised that those stores are selling and the test shoppers haven't been able to prove that.
Right. And those rules would be very similar, I would imagine, to the rules that are have been put in place to restrict the access to legal marijuana to minors. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, they're both governed by the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, so the process would be the same.
And last question in that same vein is, do we have any knowledge of any additional teeth, additional resources, ability to be able to enforce those rules more so than we have today?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not aware of any other enforcement options.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor O'Meara.
Sorry, thank you. I just had a follow-up with regards to the Halton Regional Police, and I know that my council colleagues have done their own due diligence sort of research in talking with individuals in the police force, talking with our deputy chiefs. The one issue that we seem to be put up against is this impact on the illegal market and restricting access to kids, which we heard time and time again. It's about protecting kids. Have we got any information from the Halton Regional Police, the professionals who deal with this on a day-to-day basis, in terms of us opting in or out and what impact they believe or they have, or any information so that we're all on the same page here?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I'll refer the question to the Director of Municipal Enforcement, but I will note that through the Halton working group that the town has participated in, I'm not aware of any information that has been shared from the police.
Could we get that for the January 14th meeting, possibly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can certainly ask the question. I think some of the fluidity of this situation has hampered everybody's understanding. So we have been working with them for several months, although we had to quickly change direction a few months ago. But we will go back in the interim, ask the question and see what information we can bring back.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. Councillor Knoll's questions prompted me. There's an item later on in our agenda that I wanted to ask our staff about, and that's on page 61 in our council information materials. There's an email that we received from the Canadian Cancer Society regarding municipal tobacco retail licensing, and I wonder if staff would be able to report back on this particular issue when you come back in January as to the extent to which licensing for tobacco retailers may or may not have a part to play in this as well. Because I understand that Burlington and many other municipalities are in fact licensing tobacco retailers, and does any of that apply here, and if not, should we be considering tobacco retail licensing on its own anyway?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can tell you to Councillor Adams that we do license tobacco retailers. We have for many years. I think if I remember reading the information, they were suggesting raising the fees possibly on those retail locations. That's something we can look at, but we do have to remember that it has to be cost recovery. So we'd have to just make sure whatever it was in the realm of cost recovery.
Okay, thank you.
So the upshot is that it appears that tobacco is more regulated and we have more authority there than we have on this other smokable. Councillor Robertson.
I have a question to see how much contact you've had with any of the Western provinces who have had retail right from the start. So any of the cities like Saskatoon or Calgary, Edmonton, to see what their enforcement's going like and how it's working in their cities.
Through you, Mayor Burton, given the fluid nature of changing gears quite quickly, we have been participating for the past year in a number of education events and conferences, including with Calgary, and speaking with people in British Columbia. So we are trying to learn from some of their experiences, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council, you have a motion to receive the information and to resolve that delegations on opting in or out will be heard at the January 14th meeting. And there's also a motion by Councillor Dudek, seconded by Councillor Elgar, that information be provided on the landing page of the Town of Oakville website regarding the province's options for opting in or opting out of the sale of cannabis in the Town of Oakville, and that the date of the council meeting when this issue will be voted on by council be provided. And if it's your pleasure to also carry the motion by Councillor Dudek and Councillor Elgar, I would ask that you agree to a motion to waive the procedure bylaw for the purpose of considering this motion tonight. And Councillor Dudek has cheerfully moved waiving of the bylaw, and Councillor Elgar, for some reason, is seconding it. And Madam Clerk, have I been clear enough about what we're doing on the waiving? There's a, no, I don't understand. So there's a prohibition in the procedure bylaw against introducing a motion, right, without notice. And so we're waiving the requirement for notice because these are related and it's timely. And now I think everybody understands what we're doing. So the first vote requires a 2/3 majority. Councillor?
Your Worship, just sort of point of order, is this just not an amendment to item number 3 to add another item to the recommendations?
Well, I received it as a, oh, you're right, it is proposed as an amendment. So I mistook it for a notice of motion. Thank you for your assistance. Then I'll call a vote on the amendment to the main motion. All those in favor? Yes?
Sorry, very quick question. Just, I don't want anybody left with the wrong impression in the public. There is a fairly detailed section on the website, but it's not on the front page. Okay, so I just want to make sure that it's clear, because the staff have been very diligent about posting lots of good information. It's just not linked from the main page. Thank you. Okay.
Councillor Chisholm.
Just a quick question. I assume this is just a statement of information going on the front page. We're not asking a question.
No.
Thank you.
May I call the vote on the amendment? All those in favor? Oh, Ms. Courtemanche.
Just to clarify for what's on our homepage, we have heroes, which are rotating heroes, so we do have this information on the landing page already, so it is there. So it just depends if you see that hero, you can click through them because we have
Let's see if the councillors intend for it to be the only landing page.
That would be...
Well, there's 5 or 6 that rotate. Are you content with the way it is, or are you trying to make the...
Yes, yeah. It's one of 5. I mean, we'll have...
So if this amendment carries, the only landing page will be this notice.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be problematic because we also have to promote for council meetings that are coming up in January, and other holiday closures, for example, will be up there. So I think there are a couple of items that would be there.
Would the councillors like to withdraw the amendment?
That's fine. Thanks.
Is that all right with everybody? Well, if they're already doing it, and I mean, the only difference is, do you want to make it the permanent one? Yes, sir.
Can I offer something?
Yes.
Could we, as a compromise, maybe suggest that it become the first slide in the hero slides, so that when people hit the page, it's the first one they see, so because it's topical and informative?
Ms. Courtemanche, are you able to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll look at doing that. I know it is a randomized process, so you don't see the same thing. That's part of it, but we'll see if we can get them to freeze it.
But
Councillor Grant.
Not to muddy the waters further, if possible, I know that when there are issues of an emergent nature, sometimes we do have a banner across the top, or a breaking news type of thing. Is that possible for this case?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, we'll also support it through our social media. So we link directly to the page through Twitter, through Facebook. So it's not just one way that we get the information. We do try to get people into it. We have our newsletter will go out. It'll be the lead story in the newsletter, so that we'll continue to make sure people have the information.
I'm merely exploring options. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and through you, there will be ads in the Oakville Beaver as well.
I'm hearing that there's little chance of anyone not knowing.
Oh, there's always people who won't know through Mr. Mayor, but we're doing the best we can to. We'll also provide the HERO link to members of council so that you can send it out to your distribution list as well.
So before I go to Councillor Adams, I just want to say to the mover and seconder, I'm disposed to support your amendment, and even, I mean, council has the authority to require that they change their practice and their procedure to make it the only thing there. And if you want, I mean, if that's what you want, you can have it. I don't want you to feel like we have to give way. I do believe, though, that...
Your Worship, I don't want it to be the only thing because there's a lot of very important information people need to be aware of. I do like the suggestion from Councillor Knoll that it gets more prominence quicker on, because I did sit and go through, maybe I was away from the page and came back, but I didn't see it.
Well, then, may I suggest that we add to the amendment that information be provided on a priority basis on the landing page of the town of Oakville? Yeah. And that wording also gives you the room to have other less priority things, and maybe now everybody's happy. Councillor Adams, are you happy yet?
Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to make sure that if we had a snow disaster or hydro disaster, or ice disaster in the middle of Christmas holidays, that we properly communicated that kind of stuff.
I think we're there now. Let me check. May I call the vote on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The amendment passes. Councillor Duddick and Councillor Elgar, will you serve as mover and seconder for the main motion? Thank you.
Please do.
May I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that too carries. Now, Council, we need to turn our attention to the Kerr Street grade separation update. There's a letter from Metrolinx that gives us a lot of comfort, and there's a very self-explanatory, it's a procedural matter, really. And I would ask, is there a mover and seconder for this? Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Duddick. May I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Now, we have no confidential discussion items, nor advisory committee minutes, and you've had your information items circulated electronically, and they've been useful. They were referred to tonight. And the status of outstanding issues report is also available. And we have some new business. As a matter of fact, we have a stack of new business here. So we need a seconder for a motion by Councillor Elgar that in accordance with section 1.2 sub 2 of the procedure bylaw, the rules of procedure established in section 6.1 sub 2 be waived to permit consideration of the notices of motion that we're presenting here tonight on their introduction this evening. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Worship. I'd be pleased to second this, and I applaud Councillor Elgar for bringing this forward. I think our ears will be delighted. Thank you.
So thank you. May I call the vote on the waiver? Yes, Councillor O'Meara?
Are we allowed to do this? Can we just move into the region then? I guess that's an important part.
They have welcomed us with open arms.
Fair enough. Just wanted to be sure we were on it. I've had relatives come over for dinner before without asking.
They've been most generous and solicitous and very, very helpful. And I think you'll enjoy it. So may I call the vote on the waiver? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and the waiver carries. So now we need a seconder for Councillor Elgar's motion with regard to relocating the meeting. Is that Councillor Duddick? So now all we need to know is there debate or discussion, or may I call the vote? Councillor Adams?
Would our staff be able to tell us when we're going to get to move in?
I believe that March is the date that they told me you should look for.
Thank
So
you.
you have about 4 council meetings and maybe 4 P&D? No, 4 P&D and council meetings in January and February. Well, you're already at the region. You already know it's a good hall.
I understand that. I know it is a good hall. The sound system works.
It's very comfortable for the public as well. So, Councillor Elgar.
Perhaps for the general public, we should read the motion.
All right.
And I'd also like to say that Mayor Burton did a lot of field work behind the scenes to make sure the region are welcoming us there for 2 or 3 months. I will read the motion now, and it's seconded by Councillor Duddick. Whereas the acoustics and audibility in the atrium for council and planning and development council meetings are not acceptable for the council members and the public, and whereas the council chamber construction is still underway, therefore be it resolved that all future council and planning and development council meetings be held in the regional council chamber until the new Oakville council chamber is completed. And I'm hoping this is unanimous for everyone. Thank you.
I have a feeling. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Robertson, I'm sorry, did I call the vote too fast?
I have a concern just about the January 14th meeting, that we're asking for input and delegates, and they're going to show up here and not there.
They're going to show up there because they're going to be communicated, everyone's going to be communicated with in a heroic way.
Okay, then I'm fine, thank you.
Shall I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries, and I believe it was unanimous, Councillor Elgar. Now, request for report. Okay, that's it for that. Now we move to regional reports and question period regarding town boards and advisory committees. Are there any questions or reports? Madam Clerk, there are none. Now we have requests for reports. First up, Councillor O'Meara, seconded by Councillor Robertson, that staff be directed to report to Council in February 2019 on the possibility of implementing a 2-year pilot commercial parking program in the Bronte Village District beginning in the spring of 2019. Well, this is a hurry up, if I ever saw one, right? And 2, that staff ensure that the program is developed on a full cost recovery basis with startup costs coming from the parking reserve to be paid back through parking revenues. And 3rd, that a report on program outcomes and next steps is provided to Council in the 4th quarter of 2021. And may I ask the vote for approval of this request for report? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. I could hardly tell, though. The pro hands were low and slow. The next request for report is moved by Councillor Giddings and seconded by Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel. And to request that staff report to CSC by April 2019 on available ditch treatment options to remedy water concerns that have been ongoing since 2012 in the ditches in front of 458, 462, and 466 Drummond Road, including placement of a buried pipe. This is your ultimate evidence that all politics is local. May I call the vote for approval of this request for report? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is approved. The request is approved. Next, moved by Councillor Giddings, seconded by Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, that staff report back through CSC by 2nd quarter 2019 regarding homeowner concerns of trees located in Carrington Promenade to the rear of their property at 2422 Carrington Place. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That request is approved. The next request is moved by, that's it. Has anybody got any I don't know about? Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel.
So I'd like to request that staff report back in the 2nd quarter of 2019 on how we can have an integrated approach to waterfront planning that includes all stakeholders who play and use the water, and also those that are on the shoreline in waterfront development.
Okay, thank you. You'll hand that in for the clerk?
I will.
All those in favor of the request for report? Any opposed? Oh, seconded by Councillor Giddings, of course. You want to vote again? All those in favor? It still passes, even though Councillor Giddings seconded it. That's humor.
Oh, I don't understand humor.
Anyone else? We're giving requests for reports away here. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I now would ask for a mover and seconder for the bylaws. and including as listed, all of them as listed in the agenda. Councillor Knoll and Councillor Palmer, thank you. May I call the vote? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are confirmed. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I believe that completes our work, and we are therefore adjourned. It's been great working with you.